So hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Steel Roses podcast. This podcast is created for women by women. Today, I am incredibly excited to have another guest with me today. I have Brooke with me. If you could see her, she's dancing. She's all excited. The funny part about this is a part two recording because we were so excited the first time that we chatted that we just kept talking and then we had to come back again. So that will be a very cool behind the scenes audio that you're all going to be able to preview as well. So Brooke, welcome to the podcast.
Jenny, thank you. It's like, it's like such a pump up to just even be on here and hear that like intro. So thank you.
No problem. So incredibly excited. So let me tell everybody how Brooke and I met. So we both took a course recently with Kathy Heller called Abundant Ever After. Totally life-changing. I talk about it almost on every single episode because
there's so much. There's like continues to be. Yeah.
There's so much. And at the tail end of it, like after it was done and right when the group was closing, the virtual group was closing, I had this light bulb moment of, oh my God, let me go in there and grab everybody and chat people before we lose access, because I want to make sure that I'm like seeing all my fellow podcasters and seeing who else is in there. And that's how Brooke and I got connected.
Jenny, isn't it such a, like we talked about this already, but like things happen for a reason and when they should. I really do believe it. And and like you and I talked about this too, like, doesn't matter what you're going through. And so many of us went, but like when we talked, it's like, yes. And it's just so, like whatever the word is, that just like whatever you're going through, others have been through. And so anyway, everyone in that program, I feel like it was like surrounding yourself with like-minded people that are 100% also trying to do the same thing. So
high vibe, like-minded people is where it's at. And 100%. Anytime we all came together, and I didn't have the fortune to always be on the live calls, but like anytime we all came together, I walked away with such an uplift in everything about me. And to the point where like my family members were commenting on it. When we were going through the course, I had family members actually say to me like, wow, you're glowing. And I'm like, I promise I'm not pregnant. I'm just truly in a good mood. Like that's not.
I'm not right now.
So let me tell you about Brooke. So the other part about Brooke that is truly amazing. This is the part where it was like almost like let's keep chatting moment.
For hours.
Brooke had told me she had, she's a coach and she does coaching. And so I checked out her website, brookk.com. And I was like, oh, like this is really amazing. You do coaching. I would love to have you as a guest on the podcast. And I said, the podcast is really focused on women. And we really are trying to focus in on helping uplift other women and making sure that we're reaching women on a real level for things that they are looking for and that they need. And that was the moment where Brooke looped me into her other amazing project. And Brooke, I'm going to let you talk about that because I'm like so excited about that.
Oh my God. That's why I say it's serendipitous, and thank you. So I, like a little background, I left my corporate job, traditional job about 2 years ago. And I started Brooke K that you mentioned, which is what my background is in, which is helping businesses scale essentially. So it was helping small businesses scale in their operations, their strategy, and their finance. But as I'm doing that, I was going through my own personal journey too, which was leaving my corporate job, which was my identity. And I joke, but also it's really kind of not funny about like I outsourced my identity, my job, and my kids. So like basically I was mom and a worker, and that was it. And so through that process and through AEA, I was like, my passion, it like lights me up or angers me, but either emotion, it's really big, which tells me that is where I need to go, was with other women who are feeling the same way. Like I talk to other women, they're like, I'm just not aligned. Like I've worked hard. I'm super ambitious. I love, I want to be successful, but like I am burned out. I am not in doing what I love. I don't even know what my hobby is or what I love. And so that put me on the path. So the website and the community that I started, it's called Us Rising. And so it's for women, and I like to say, who have outsourced their identity to work and to being a mom. And so it's helping them through coaching, We have a coaching program where I work with women who are both staying in their corporate job, but just really need to redefine what they like, whether they've hit burnout or some of them, you hit to a certain, you're like striving for the promotion or the executive job or the senior level, whatever it is, and you get it and you're like, this is not it. Like, this is not what I thought. It's more of the same. That's not where the happiness comes from. That's not where the fulfillment comes from. So it's a lot of tapping into yourself and working through that. But then some women decide, like, I was on the wrong path. I want to do my own thing. And so it's kind of that. So there's coaching around that. But then separately, we also run retreats. So we have one coming up in September, which is really focused on the self-care side. So I really believe that, like, women, and then stop me, but this is the last part, is like, when you are aligned with what you love, like, there's so many macro factors that keep us from really excelling and being our true selves. And, like, the disparity in, like, the pay, the wage gap, and the invisible labor. But when women can spend the time and carve it out and, like, figure out what they truly want without from a depleted standpoint, but like what makes you come alive, like, there is so much potential. And so for me, I think the first step, regardless of it's business or at home or whatever, is like, and that's what AEA, the program we were in, like, was like coming back to yourself. Like, what do you like? What do you like doing, and separate from everyone else. So that's it. And that's why when you said, I was like, oh my God, we're like the same. Yes.
Well, what I'm going to say here is we actually, in our, I guess, backstage audio that will eventually get released too. I told the story to Brooke and I said to her, I was like, it's funny because, like, through AEA, there's all these meditations we have access to and everything. And one of them is, you're talking to your younger self. And listeners, I know this sounds hippy dippy, and I trust me, this is not,
I'm not saying, I'm raising my hand too. Like, I'm there. Yeah.
It sounds a little like, really, you're talking to your younger self, but no, it's really more of you're kind of unlocking part of your brain that has basically been pushed to the back of the closet.
Yeah.
That is really what it is. And so you sit there and you're focusing your attention on yourself and talking to yourself and saying, like, well, what did I want to do? What was it that brought me joy? And when I was little, I really wanted to help people. And I had wanted to go into some sort of social work, altruistic path and, really help people. And I remember I was little and I went to my mom and I was like, I really want to do tutoring. She was like, well, you're only 8. Like, what are you going to tutor? And I was like, I can help kids with their homework. Like, maybe I can volunteer at a shelter. Like, I wanted to do all these these things. And then, that, went away. And then there was creative Jenny when she was a little bit older. So I used to write all the time and I would enter contests that brought me so much joy. Like, I loved writing. I got to a certain point where life started impacting what I thought I needed to do. So it no longer became, what do I want to do? It became, what do I need to do to make money? And what do I need to do as a result of what I'm seeing here? And disclosing a little bit more, when I was 16, my parents separated. They separated, and that tremendously impacted how I responded to things. And I remember at that time saying to myself, I need to get a good job. I need to make sure that I'm never in a position where somebody can, divorce me and leave me with nothing, kind of thing. So that changed my whole, creativity went out the window. And I was like, whatever I need to do to make money is where I'm going to be at.
I mean, first of all, like, little Jenny, I want to give her a hug that wants to help everyone. And, like, when you were 16, did you know it at the time? Were you consciously aware of, like, I need to make a change in what I'm going after? Like, were you like awake enough to know that like the impact it had on you back then?
I didn't know it at that point.
Yeah.
I still kept with, I want to help people, because when I eventually did go to college, my original major was psychology, and I wanted to go into psychology. And within the first year, I figured out pretty quickly that you don't make a ton of money in that right away. And I dropped it and I kept it as a minor. I stopped looking into it entirely and I focused on communications because, as you can tell, I like to talk, and communications is like, I love it. I love marketing. I love media. Like, I love it. I think it's really cool. But that's where I ended up. I was like, I need to make money. Like, I can't fool around here, kind of thing. And I did. I lost all of that creativity that was really lighting me up.
I mean, and I feel like so two things. One is the path that you go on, anyone goes on, even when it becomes unhappy, like you're unhappy with it, there is a part of it that it's drawing you to it for some reason. So like communications clearly is an aspect of something you like, but then we go whole hog and forget everything else that we like. And then that's when we lose a part of ourselves. And I always say it's like awareness is the first thing. Like for me, and I think I've mentioned this before, but I know we were talking about this in the last conversation, is it took me a while to realize that like me leaving and going towards something that, or at least striving to figure out what that next thing is for me, was not me waving the white flag and being like, oh, I can't do it and I give up. It was like, I believe I could be more impactful and more happy and have more of all that stuff. And it's not like the metrics of money, but I do believe that will come too. But it's more like it's going towards that. So there was part of that was switching it off, but part of it too is just this awareness, like we talked about, where I was like, Brooke, what's your hobby? And I'd laugh that off. And I was like, you're so ridiculous. If you think I have a hobby, like I'm too busy. I'm too busy. Right. But it took an awareness of like, why do I keep saying that? As opposed to just like owning it. Like I'm just owning it and that's my identity. And I'm just going to keep doing that and being like, but I'm actually unhappy with that. And I'm not doing things that I like. So I had to like pause enough. And honestly, the pandemic was part of it because we were all paused in our house. Like what am I going to do with myself? But I think that's part of it too. So that's why I asked when you were 16, if you even know, because I feel like there's this part, we get so busy that there's no pause to quiet down or to slow down or to even see like we're just in reactive mode with the kids and jobs and work. And it becomes like hustle culture becomes a good thing, right? Like it's an indication of how important you are.
That's like a badge of honor right now.
Yes.
Like if you have a hustle, it's like, oh, and it's like, well, no, we don't. Like, yes, we're, do your thing, like put yourself out there.
Yes.
If it lights you up, put yourself out there, but like, not because you're hustling because like, oh, like, let me throw more on my plate. And I'm so overwhelmed that I'm like crying every day, which like my stepdaughter when I was at my last place, she used to make fun of me, and because she knew, she was like, what do I want to be like Jenny crying every week? No. Right? And I'm like, oh my God, I do cry. It's okay to cry, but also I shouldn't be doing that every day. I guess I shouldn't be crying. Brooke, you mentioned like 2 years ago you left corporate, and I want to circle back to that. So how did you know? Like, what was the moment for you? Was it a pivotal, or were you in the middle of a spreadsheet and you're like, screw it?
There were 2 points that I'll say, but it was a slow, like it was a constant. Not constant, but every 2 to 3 years I would switch my job. It was like something wasn't there. I wasn't unhappy, and I'd find a reason. I was like unhappy with my boss because I wasn't, moving up enough, or whatever. I had to travel too much and I had kids. So there was so I was always like moving. And the last company I was at, 2 things happened. So one, I was in a role that I thought was going to be it. It was in an entertainment industry. It was like with a bunch of creatives, and like people just loved working in this group. And I'm like, this is it. Finally, I can like stretch, because my boring, like, sorry to anyone, but like finance and CPA background, I can do some like what I thought would be fun. Like, and it was draining for me. And that was one thing where I was like, everyone I'm around is loving what they're doing and I'm not. And so that dropped the idea that like, you just kind of surround yourself, just talk about AEA in a positive way, right? The program we're in, and people are striving to do more and better and different things. That was like, before that, I was used to being around people that are just like, all of us are like, you gotta work like tonight, I have to work, the weekend, like, but it was just like the norm. And so when I was around people that were like, they were enjoying it and I wasn't, I was like, something's misaligned. And then when I had a conversation with my boss and being like, I think I need to find the next thing, like, great opportunity. And it wasn't, I like to say I wasn't running away from something, but I knew there was something I wanted to go towards, which also was pivotal. It wasn't like I hated everything about it and it's time to go. It was in like a good headspace that I was like, I got to go. And I remember my boss saying, well, what would keep you here? Like, would eventually you want my job? And that was the other pivotal time. Cause I was like, I could never have your job.
Yeah. You're like, I can't see that.
No, she didn't have kids, which is fine. That's by choice and wonderful. But I have 3 children. She worked literally around the clock because it was a global company. And I was like, and that's also where I was like, what am I working so hard? Like I am working so hard to get to her role that I don't actually want, you know?
Yeah.
So that's where I was like, something's got to give. I'm not ready to give up working. Like, that's not what I want, but I want, like, there is more here that I know I can be fulfilled, and I've got to start like spending the time to figure out what that is. So,
you know, it's interesting, like the pivotal moments that really like have an impact, because I've said this, we had a whole episode on work-life balance, and I talked about how horrid I used to be. I'm really sorry if you worked with me between 2007 to 2010. I apologize.
You were the don't column at that point.
I was not, like, if you really think of like the typical like young, hungry, like high-heeled stiletto, like that was me, and I was gonna stomp on anybody. So,
and you don't know better. Like, you're
like, I know, so embarrassing now. But you know, it's interesting because so we had this work-life balance episode, and I had said there was a couple of moments like in my career where I knew that I needed to scale back, because you don't have to work that way. So that's the other thing too, that I like. This isn't really just about like, oh, you know, you need to leave. Everyone needs to leave corporate. You don't have to leave corporate. Corporate's cool. Like it's great. And it provides an income. Like we need that, but you don't have to be like that. You know, you don't have to work in that fashion. And that's what gets a little bit lost, because for such a long time, it was a badge of honor to just work yourself to death, basically. And I had, a couple years ago, there was two things that happened the same summer. One, I found out that a former colleague of mine, she was my boss at this one particular agency. She stayed there after I left. She was there for like 12 years, and she died. She's the same age as me. And I saw it at random, and on LinkedIn, I saw it, and I was like, is this real? So I got in touch with a former coworker, and I called her up. I was like, what the heck happened? Like, you know, I'm going to be 40. I'm not, you know, like, what happened?
This isn't supposed to happen.
This isn't supposed to happen. She essentially worked herself to death. She never took care of herself. She didn't go to the doctor. She didn't matter if she was sick. Nothing mattered. She showed up at the office and made sure she like did whatever. She controlled the whole thing. Flash forward that, you know, she did that for years. And what ended up happening is she ended up with, she had like a kidney infection, something to that effect, never got it checked out. She ended up, by the time, the day that she passed, she was literally just walking out of her front door, and she was with her fiance, and she just dropped right on the front lawn.
That is so,
and it was because she became septic, and she never took care of herself.
I like to say that is like the worst case scenario of burnout and lack of work-life balance. But like, that's the path a lot of people and women are on, because naturally I feel like we are caregivers first and others, but not for ourselves. And like, for me, the difference honestly was having kids, because for me, it has to be about someone else for me to take care of myself. So two things, right? And so the kids took a lot for me, but I was also being really short with them and not like the mom that I wanted to be. So that was one thing that had me be like, what is what is this? But then like I'm always in my head. Like in a negative, like in a, just overthinking things, but also like just my background, strategy. And like, I like solving problems, but like, that's why pausing is good. Not just because it's like, you need to create boundaries, but to be able to like feel in your body, like, and that sounds woo woo again too. And that's why I was like, what are you talking about? But like, what is happening in here? And do I want to do this? And what feels right? And like, am I like stressed because I didn't have enough like coffee this morning? Or is it because it's been perpetual for the last 6 months? And I need to make a change.
Always waking up and pissed off. And that's the other thing too, that a lot of people don't do. And when my kids were young, like I didn't do this. I had to just survive. The first 3 years that my children, because I have twins, and then I have
I bless you. I do not.
And they're only a year apart. So it's wild. So the first 3 years that they were growing up, I did nothing for myself. Like when I say like I had the twins and then I didn't see a doctor again for 2.5 years.
No.
By the time I went back to the doctor, I was in horrible shape. I was incredibly overweight.
Let's take a quick break.
Are you interested in podcasting but not sure where to start? My name is Jenny Benitez, and I'm here to help guide you through your podcast launch and maintenance. Check out the link in the episode description for Podcasting Unboxed, your comprehensive startup guide. I am very excited to work with you. I just not good. I was just not in a good spot. And I was talking through the doctor about everything that was going on. And I happened to tell her how I was only literally sleeping possibly 2 to 3 hours a day.
I mean,
and she was like, oh, so they wake you up, you sleep from like 11 to 3 or like, what do you, and I was like, no, I mean like spread out. And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, I at that point, because there was 3 of them,
Jenny,
it was like they would go to bed and then like one would wake up and then it'd be a domino. And then I would get like 10 minutes of sleep and then I would wake back up.
I do not know how you
So she literally said to me, and I will, in the early days, like my husband tried to help as much as he could, but he works in construction. He's an electrician. So I was like, it's unsafe for you to be tired.
Yeah.
It's not safe. You actually need to sleep. Well, so the doctor actually told me, and I didn't even realize this. So I'm going to say it in case anybody else didn't realize it. Because I wasn't sleeping, I was literally taking years off of my life. That's what she told me. She was like, if you continue down this path, because the real reason I had gone to her was because I had gotten so overweight that I was becoming depressed. And I was like, I don't understand. I'm trying every single diet I can. What the hell? And when I got to the sleep thing, she was like, look, you're literally taking years off your life. And she was like, and the reason you're not losing weight is because you're so fatigued that your body is using whatever energy it has to just keep it together. She was like, so you have to make some kind of shift. And I remember I walked out of there and I was pretty pissed off because at that point in time, and I was like, what am I supposed to do? I have 3 babies. It took some time and now I'm in better shape. But in that moment, I was like, oh my God, there is nothing to help me.
No, I know. And I've heard this a lot. And I do want to say for anyone that's listening, that's in that, like that is such a hard time, like is you are in it with the infants and the kids that are just so needy. Like now my youngest is 5. So I feel like I'm a little bit on the other side of it where they're needy in a different way, certainly not through the night and everything. And what I like to say though is, so what I lost then was even an awareness of what I needed. Like it does not mean when you are in that, like you are going to get the sleep or you're going to get the exercise, like in that stage. But like, I didn't even know what I wasn't getting that I should, because like, if you have an awareness as a human being, much less as like just a individual that is unique to everyone else, but like you need 6, let's cut it down, at least like 5 hours of sleep, when you're in those there is a minimum amount of sleep to even like be able to function as a mom to these children that are so needy to you. And then there is like health, there's nutrition that you need, but like there's other things like that just mentally, you talk about like a physical workout, there's mental workouts and stuff too. So for me, it was even a lack of knowing what I needed, even if I wasn't getting it, but you can then, it's like tracking it, right? It's like, God, it has been 4 weeks since I've had a 2-minute shower by myself, since I've been able to go to the bathroom without like whatever your needs are. And I feel like then that puts it at the forefront because a lack of awareness of what even you like or need or want, then you lose track that it has been 6 months or a year, or now it's going on 2 years that I have. And because then it becomes the norm, and the benchmark, which it shouldnly be, right. And so I think that's the thing for me too, is like, you're not always going to get it. But like, I think the first thing I've historically have given up was even an acknowledgement of like what I needed as a baseline, And so it just became like, okay, what does everyone else need?
I think like the biggest like takeaway that I'm hearing between both of us chatting is really self-awareness and being like just aware, like taking stock. And I used to do that a lot. I still do it now actually, but not quite as often. I used to do it a lot when I first started looking into like manifesting and all that stuff. The biggest thing, and it's applicable to anything really, is, taking a minute
Yep.
and being like, is this something that's making me happy,
Yeah.
or is this something that is just draining? Like,
Yeah.
does your job truly light you up? Do you get excited?
Yep.
Or does the weekend come and then like by Sunday you're starting to get tense and you're starting to feel sick? Physical symptoms are a really great sign, in my opinion. Like if you're, Sunday evening, you're feeling nauseous and migraines and you're sick and your back hurts and all this stuff. And it's like, is that every Sunday that happens to you? Because that might be something.
Yes. And you said it earlier too when we were talking, but I think it's really important is like, this isn't to like say anything negative about a traditional job or a corporate job, because I work with a lot of women that love that. And what we work through is they had just gotten out of alignment of like, within that role, what is best for them. And so like you said, sometimes it's creating boundaries, but sometimes like, that's why I think, and it becomes so hard, but the harder it gets to slow down and take a pause, I think that means the more you need it. Because like some of the women I work with, like there's like values exercises, right? Or there's, to your point, assessing the previous week and just being like, what was the best and what was the worst? And like over time realizing like, I really like this aspect. I don't like this aspect. But we get kind of, at least I did, and a lot of women I talk to, the reverse, where it's like very reactive. We're like, go, go, go. And taking in what others are requesting, because it's like, I can do it. I can kill it. I'm going to keep doing it. But then you're just like on intake mode, as opposed to like, what do I really like? It's like what others need for you to do in the projects and the, like all the management of employees, Do
you find that a lot, like with the women that you coach, that like a big part of the problem, because I've done quite a bit of research on this, because we've talked about this in other episodes, where like, especially like women in professional settings, like we have this tendency to just, well, one, we sell ourselves short consistently.
Yeah.
We don't bring ourselves to the table, and we'll wait and anticipate that, like, oh, well, they're going to see how great my work is. No, they won't. And then they're going to give me a promotion. No, they won't. So like, I've read that. And then also the other thing is like the, unable to say no to stuff.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, so there's macro and there's micro character. We can talk about like your traditional feminine characteristics that most women have, and then the male characteristics. And clearly, honestly, like Fortune 500 companies or wherever you work, it's like still male dominated. So it is about speaking up and, the characteristics that are more aggressive and kind of like, and I feel like a lot of women, that's not how historically and traditionally in the macroeconomic sense we're raised, so it's learning that as you go and losing some of kind of what you are, like you said, like there's this collaboration that is inherent in a lot of women more so, and that's not in most companies. They like to say, but that as you get higher and higher, that is not how, so yes, 100%, I think that's the case. And I mean, I think like many times, like you said, waiting for, someone else to kind of raise your hand to, so they're like, yes, many women I talk to. And I think part of it too is, it's knowing what you want, being able to identify, like, instead of what others, like your identity isn't tied up in all this, but it's like, it's really being comfortable, which is why I keep going back to like the self-care and kind of the softer side, because it's like, once you know yourself, you feel more comfortable around others kind of putting it out there, you're not trying, because you can go from one company to another company is going to ask for something completely different, Right. And so that's what I spend a lot of time with the women is like, who are you first, separate from all of that? And it sounds woo-woo. It sounds like kind of like, what is that going to do for my career? But that's where you get like that, like this, what I bring to the table, regardless of where I am and what the culture is, like, I know that this is important and this is what I want to stand for,
It's interesting because we keep talking about this woo-woo, right? And I want to say it is the reason why this is interesting. And I want to point it out because I had the same experience when we did AEA.
Yeah.
I remember going into it being like, all right, she has workbooks and there's videos. I never did any homework, by the way. No. I never did any homework. Yeah. I just wasn't part of my plan.
Yeah.
But the thing that was the most impactful to me was taking 20 minutes in the morning to meditate.
I know.
That is what has brought the most change. And it's wild because in all of my life, all I've tried to do is control everything around me, get up early. My husband makes fun of me all the time because I'm like nuts and I'm like trying to do all the things. I'm like, I got to get on the computer. I got to send this email. This person called me. Well, no, like, why don't you just like, I literally challenge you. If you're listening to this episode, I'm going to challenge out there. It doesn't have to be 20 minutes because I know that sometimes you don't have that. Today, I didn't have that. I only did it for 5 minutes. Like, you can literally go onto YouTube, find a meditation for 5 minutes and just take a minute. And there's other ways that you can also do it. Like, so it doesn't necessarily mean you have to sit in silence.
No.
I was talking to somebody else recently where they had said to me, they're like, it doesn't mean like, meditating isn't the same for everybody. And if it's, going to the gym, maybe that's where you go and that's your focus and that's where you get clarity. Like that's for my husband. I was trying to get him to do traditional meditations with me and he was like, I can't friggin' do that. You're
not going to sit here.
But he can go to the gym for 2 hours. That's great. Like that's really what you need to be doing. So you have to find, and we've said this a whole bunch of times, find what fits your path.
Yeah. It's like a workout. I mean, like we talked about this, like it's like a traditional, like you're like at the gym, like people need different workouts depending on what your goal is. So like the same is for clearing your head. And I agree with you too. Like I was like, what, why am I going to spend time doing this? But I think because it is like, especially a lot of the women I work with, they're like really ambitious and successful and stuff. And that becomes like, it's hard to like the slowdown because it's like, I've proven how much I can do. And so it's not that you need to because you can't, it's because you will be better. And it's like, you got to prove that to yourself. Like when you can clear enough, like the creativity and the insight and the ideas that will come. And so that for me was what finally flipped it. Cause I was like, I don't need this. It's just wasting my time. But I was like, but I can be like, that's when like, I got like an even better idea, or I'm going to solve this problem at work even, better. And so you're right. Like my husband, it's golf. He like, that's his thing, but he's 4 hours of like, which how does anyone have that time? I don't know, but like he's outside and he's walking, it can be so exactly, which it can be dancing. That's what big thing for people is like, put on your best dance mix for like 5 minutes and just like get it out
there. I love doing that. I freaking love doing that.
Me too. Right. And it like totally changes your mood. So it's just knowing what it is. It's recognizing when you're in that, like the, whatever it is, like the swirl and busyness and like, you can't stop that. Like, okay, that's when you need it. And then what is it for you that like just allows you to take that deep breath,
And when you do that, and we were talking about self-awareness a lot here, and we talked about little Jenny and how that's how I figured out what I like really. And it's crazy. You're right. Cause I have the same problem with, when people be like, oh, what's your hobbies? at work, you have to do those like, there's things or whatever, and all the things, and you gotta like, it's like
all the
team building, whatever. And it's like, well, what are your hobbies? And I remember literally the same thing. I'd be like, I don't have any hobbies. I have children. Like I have no time for hobbies. And it was almost like, oh, I'm so important that I don't have time for this. And it's like, well, that's not really like, that's not okay. The other thing I want to say too, and my cousin Melissa, who's not on this episode with us, I recently discovered through us working together on the podcast, I discovered how incredibly creative she is. I had no idea the artistic talent. She's going to laugh when she knows that I said this out loud, but Brooke, I was astounded because we have our website, stillroseswomen.com.
Yes. Love it, by the way.
Okay. So I'm very like blocky and very linear. And so I did the whole framework for it. And I was like, hey, like this looks good. We're going to throw it up, like go in there and edit it. And she's like, oh, let me tweak it though. Give me a couple of days. And I was like, oh, okay. Oh my God. I went back and I was like, holy crap. I was like, I can't believe you did it. I think she did it in like 2 hours. And I was like, how did you see that? So that actually influenced how I started looking at stuff. And I said to her, I was like, you need to be doing something. Yes. Even like photography. She takes she's so creative. And it's not like she doesn't let that little secret. No. I had no idea. We've been friends for our whole lives. I had no idea how creative she was.
Isn't it crazy? And I've never met her clearly, but like what I get from that is like, I think I told you, like I always said, I'm not creative, but I think it's the things, it's whatever it is when you're in flow and you're just like, and you don't even realize it, so it could be like work. Like I joked with you, like some people, their creativity comes through on spreadsheets, right? Because it's like, oh my God, in the font and format, and I can get it in the bold, like the numbers are in the alignment and whatever. But like
the formulas,
like that's its own form of creativity. But again, like that's like when you're in the flow, and that is like when you're like your best self and like so many ideas. And so I think like, I joke too, because that's my background. But when I had to start doing like on Canva, you do, like same with the website, but you also do just different things. And I'm like, my thing was PowerPoints. Actually, when I had to give a presentation, first time I was like, this is going to push me out of the, I like throw my hands up. But then I got in there, I was like, oh, like I actually care about the color. Like, but it's like exploring that a little bit to even see, and it, is not just your side thing. It can be in your job. Like
it could be. So I'm glad you're saying that too, because I don't want anyone to feel like, oh, you need to now go out and get a creative hobby. That's not really it. Like in this moment, like what are you excited about?
Yes.
Like, are you excited? Are you excited about work? Is there an element of your job that you really, really love? Like this sounds like really like, you know, boring and whatever, but I used to really like putting together processes. I loved when I was, oh my God, give me a standard SOP, like a standard operating procedure. And I was like in heaven. And it's so boring. Like it's boring, but like at the moment I was like, this lights me up. I feel like I'm doing something here. And that also aligns with, I wanted to help people. I felt like I was doing something in doing that. And that's why like we need to be, I want to be clear. Like if you're in a job and you feel like you're in a rut, like, well, number one, like coaching is like huge. I strongly recommend, like, even if you just do one session, find somebody. And maybe like not everyone's for everybody. Like that's definitely, that's 100%.
No. Just like friends. Yeah.
Oh yeah. 100%. Just like,
here's what I said, Jenny, too, because I mean, even what I do now, I was kind of a little bit anti it because I'm like, who knows better? You know, like what is someone, they're not in my shoes or whatever. But like now I have women that talk to me, and same when I work with coaches, it's like your personal board of directors. Like who else can just kind of see you, like the work side, the personal side that's neutral and can be like, let's see what's best for you holistically, you know? And you're exactly right. It's not a leave your job, because actually then you're running away from something. Like if you are not fully like, I love it, just an acknowledgement that that can be the case in a job, that is a possibility in your life, but you're not going to be able to plan it out. Like you're not going to know here where that is, like, you know, 10 steps down the road. But to your point, what we're talking about is like, lean into be aware of what is like exciting you in the aspect. Lean into the days that are good, note them down, and start moving more towards that. It's like breadcrumbs, but then you're going to start going towards that, and you're going to get used to the feeling good, as opposed to getting used to at the end of the day, you're like, it's fine. You know, like it's like a muscle that you're strengthening and you're moving towards, and like, oh, this is more fun. Oh, this is more fun. And like you said, you wouldn't have 10 years ago been like, oh, SOPs are the end all be all. And it probably still is not, but it was combining things that you would have never, like, you know, like, but it's hitting a bunch of the things that you know that you enjoy now. So like, you can be a little bit more proactive and like, oh, that checks these 5 boxes that I know are important to me. You know?
Exactly. So, how did you, I'll put you in the spot here. How did you know that you were being fulfilled with coaching? Like, how did you get that sense that like, I want to do this, like, because switching from corporate is a pretty big deal. Like it's a total shift from coaching.
So I couldn't have jumped right to it. I definitely, like I said, I did consulting because that was in my head and what my background was. And it like made sense from a business plan. And I still enjoy that business side, but 2 things. One, I was doing it for free. And my husband, who's in finance, would be like, why are you spending all this time? And I didn't even look at it as coaching, but I just love meeting women in particular and talking through things, and like it's a 2-way street too, but like, what are you doing? And I love when I feel like my story can help. So like, just, this is what's helped me. And the more you do it, the more you are helpful. So one was, I was doing it and not because, and so that's like, I guess a hobby. Hey, that is my hobby. There you go. But second is, at the end of it, I'm excited. Like I'm like energized as opposed to depleted. And that took me a while, because that took me a while to understand the difference, because I, again, never was like in my body and noticing energy levels and like what feels good and where do I feel good. It was like in my head, and I was always like, can I make money? What's the charging? You know, how do I market? Like it was always that side. And so it took me, it's like peeling back the onion of yourself, which is why I always say like, but those are the 2 things. It's like, I was doing it I want to do it even if there's no business around it. I'll do it on the side, and also like energized. Like I could talk your ear off for like the next hour and a half.
Which we did already earlier this week. Accidentally did.
There you go. Welcome to my world.
And then from there, that's where you determined like, okay, well, I'm still going to do consulting. That still feels like, you know, something that you're touching, but then also you went to, so I had, and
Yeah.
correct me if I have the website wrong, thisisuSrising.com.
Yes, this is Us Rising.
When you pointed me there, so Brooke and I were going back and forth via email. This is how it started, via email. And I was like, oh, like send me your site, like let me check it out. I'm like, yeah, coaching, cool, or whatever. And I was telling her some of my stories. She was like, hold on a second, I've got an ace up my sleeve.
I see you. I match you also. It was so, and you know what is, I know for anyone who's thinking of the path of, thinking about leaving, I will say it is still, I don't know if uncomfortable is the word, but having you call it multi-passionate, right? So forever, I was doing consulting. I have some clients on the small businesses, looking to grow. And then thinking about doing like coaching and retreats more formally. And there's another product business that we've started too. So there's several things going on that forever I looked at myself like, oh my God, it's shining object syndrome. You're just like jumping from thing to thing. And I looked at it as negative, but it was because I'd always been in my one singular job that I had to go to the next step. And I finally, I was like, as human beings, we're not singular. You have different interests. And it was for me knowing enough to say, it's not because there are times that you jump from something because it gets hard, and so there's that's, you've got to work through and just understand it for what it is. But having several things, that's a new thing for me since I left the traditional workforce, and be like, how do I, is that, and when someone says, what do you do? How do I explain it? And I'm like, and that was also a mirror moment for me that I was over dependent on explaining myself by the job I was in, so there's some of these moments that were but it was a slow growth of being aware and being like, why does that bother me? Why does that bother me? Why does that bother me?
It's interesting because you're right. It is something that I leaned on. I leaned on that pretty heavily to be like, oh, I'm a marketing executive. That sounds really cool.
Yes,
That's awesome.
And, a company heard for it. Here's
done.
And what else do you need to know?
God. I mean, forget about it. Even traveling for business, I was so excited.
Yep.
I mean, it is the worst. Traveling for business is not fun.
No, I agree.
It's grueling. And I remember when I was doing it, and I did it quite a bit when my kids were little, but I did it because I was like, oh, they're babies. They have no idea that I'm not here. It's not a big deal.
Yep.
But as soon as they got old enough to pay attention, I was like, that's it. I'm done. And every job after that, I was like, I refuse. I will not travel. That's my no.
I mean, I'll tell you a story too. And to the extent it helps anyone out there, but I felt the same way about traveling. I was in consulting for a while. And so every week I'd have to get on the plane, and I had my first, who was 2 years old at the time, but then I was pregnant with my second. And I remember, and I was feeling important, each week I got it. And I was the frequent flyer miles, and I got my place where I'm going, and the hotel, you've got, points. And the client really enjoyed, the work I was doing was good. But I remember, so I was on kind of that high, but never really, I think, sitting with it and is this really in alignment with what I want? Because it's important. Right. But I got to the client site one week, and my manager at the time sat me down. He's like, and I think I was traveling, it was Tuesday through Thursday. So it wasn't the full week at the time. And he sat me down. He's like, we're really going to need you to travel more.
Oh my God.
He said that, little tears, I'd never cried in a job before. And they, I couldn't even stop. It was what? It was so, and I was, cause I had kind of shoved what was important to, the whole of what was important to me, and solely focused on one thing. And I was that was such a sign. That was the fact that that I couldn't even hide those feelings and emotions, which usually I didn't show. And I was I think I'm going down a different path that I don't think I want to continue down, but it takes sometimes, I feel it's takes a push, in that direction, more so for you to be whoa, where am I going?
And it's important to recognize that too. And I think that we've got, it's so loud out there now with social media. No one is ever disconnected. There's always something to look at.
Yep.
And then once, when you're out and about too, it's obviously there, it's sensory overload.
Yes.
And because of all these things, people are falling out of alignment faster. And everybody, when we say out of alignment, we mean your path that that lights you up, basically. Whatever is exciting for you, whatever you truly, truly love, when you start to fall off of that path, you might be okay for a little while, but eventually it's going to start wearing on you.
Yep.
And when you get that feeling, like everyone starts to ignore their gut feelings after a while, like, especially like, I mean, at my age, like you kind of like, you don't even think about it anymore.
No.
It's like second nature. But now I'm like, I pay attention.
Yeah.
And if I get like because of AEA, I'm very mindful of being in alignment. And I like, I get this, what do I call Melissa, I tell her, I'm like, I get the bubbles or whatever. And she's like, but
someone asked me too, like, where do you feel it in your gut? I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. You know, like this is like a year ago. I'm like, I don't
like this is where it comes, right?
But then she had like someone had me sit, and again, it feels woo, but she had me sit with it. She's like, okay, you're feeling stress, you know, like Sunday night scaries or whatever. But she was like, sit with that. Where do you feel it? Is it in your chest? Is it in your stomach? Is it in your head? Is it getting hot? Like, and it's, for me, it's my chest. And I was like, chest. She's like, that is your gut. That is you telling you that you're not in a lie. Like something is going on. You have to listen to it. I was like, what? That is so crazy, you know? But I'm like, duh.
It's real though. It's a very real thing.
It's so real.
The other part that like I learned through AEA, I looked more into, and this is going to sound incredibly woo woo, but I want to put this out there too, because it makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, we have chakras in our body, and it's like power points or center points. And this past year, I have lost my voice 3 times.
It's so crazy.
I have never lost my voice before. No. And each time I had to stay silent for like 5 days.
That's so crazy.
Everyone who listens regularly knows that would be incredibly hard for me to do. And I had to I turned into it. Like my coworkers like were joking. They're like, you're like a pantomime. Like, because we would be on calls and I'd have to just give a thumbs up or like smile.
Like a silent retreat you were on, but in your real life.
I was forced into it. And it was interesting because like the first time it happened, I wasn't mad, because normally I get really pissed when I'm sick, and I wasn't mad. And I kind of just like, interesting. I think maybe this is just like, I'm supposed to be silent and just listen and pay attention. Yeah. And each time it happened, I was like, I guess I'm supposed to be shutting up now. And I just kind of went with it. I was like, all right. And thankfully it hasn't happened recently.
I think, I mean, on that topic, I'll just share like Ariana Huffington, who, I mean, you could like super success, you know, like, but she'll share the story, right, of Huffington Post, and she finally had it. Well, she literally collapsed because she was ignoring all the stuff too. She just posted this quote of hers, which I love. It was on LinkedIn like this week, which was, when the world gets crazy and you feel like you're spinning out of control, that's the time you need to get silent. And that is when, like, and it was so, it's like and so it was like, you take a second with it, right? But absolutely right. She's like, that's when you hear your gut. That's when you get silent and you know your inner like direction, where you need to go. And I'm like, and it's the time you need to do it the most is when you feel like the most out of control.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
I have the answers.
Don't try to control it. Don't try to lean into that and go for it. Because that was always like my my cushion for me was like, I need to control the shit out of this. What can I do to control it? Yeah. And you actually want to do the opposite. Yeah. You want to just take a minute. Yeah. And take it in.
Let it happen. See, like, what is this saying to me? You know,
what am I feeling? And that, again, I would have, if you had asked me that even 2 years ago, I would have never said that. No, I would have the amount of change that has happened over the past year with like finding Kathy Heller and launching the podcast and finding AEA. And then obviously Brooke and I are best friends now. Like, it's just like it's
my new long lost best friend. I can't believe it. I mean, here's the one thing I want to leave to is there is a difference between misalignment, which I feel like I had been in for a while, you know, and pushing yourself in an uncomfortable way, but what is good, you know, and that also takes getting quiet because, and the difference for me is the sustained, like you said, there can be days where you have bad days or you're like, oh my God, I'm really nervous about a presentation, or I put myself out there for a speech or whatever it is. I have a new boss. That is growing in good ways. You're expanding your comfort level. You're like limiting beliefs, all the stuff that you can dig up, but it's the sustained. Every Sunday you have the Sunday scaries and you are getting more and more tired by the day and you're not sleeping well. And like all of those, which by the way, lead to super unhealthy in general, but that's the sign that you're not in alignment and because, and I think we've said this at the start is it starts with acknowledgement and a knowing that it can be different, and you can have a job that not only pays you, but also that you enjoy. Like that is out there, and it is a striving to find that, you know, it's day by day. And it doesn't have to be a hard striving where you leave your job and you're like,
no,
sell your house and everything.
No,
it's just,
it does not need to be like that.
Yeah. Every day, what felt good? What was the good thing today? What do I want to do tomorrow? And it's like you said, a year later, you can't believe, you know, you follow that breadcrumb of like, let me try a podcast. You are the perfect example. Like that's exactly it.
Yeah. Now I'm like, this is like literally like I had said to you the other day, I'm like, when I get to come on and talk with people, and even when it's like myself and my cousin, like this happened where she's not able to come to all the guest recordings because of her schedule. And I'm like, I'll take them. It's not a big deal. But then her and I won't record the weeks that I record with other guests. Yeah. So it'll be like 2 or 3 weeks in between her and I having FaceTime again. And she tells me, she's like, damn, she's like, I always feel it. She's like, she feels it when we don't get there. And then when we actually get to connect, she's like, it's like a relief. Yeah. And I tell them like, this is such a good thing. And it's been such a joyful thing for me that I'm like, I love it. I don't even care that I'm like doing extra stuff. Like, I don't care. I love it.
You got to keep doing it. And like you said, like you are the perfect example. You're energized after it. Like, even though you have your full-time job, but you're doing this. Yeah. And that doesn't mean, again, grind it out and everyone has to do the side gig, but it's a sign that it's like, you're getting energy from it. And it's so like, that's so amazing, and keep doing it because clearly it's hitting a pulse with people and I love listening to you. I'm just so grateful. We found each other. So
I know. Well, Brooke will definitely be back again because we already had a preliminary discussion about like all these other things that we could discuss.
So many.
You have to check her out. So BrookeK.com, thisisusrising.com, and then you can find her on social at Brooke K Coaching. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on with me today.
Oh my God. I love our conversations. I told you I could talk to you for hours.
It's going to be like weeklies now. I know. Right? I can feel it. Yeah.
But it's a sign that like, there's so many women out there that need to keep doing what you're doing and hearing these stories. And everyone's trying to find their thing. Right? Let's just keep trying to find our thing. Find each other that we can talk through. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening so much. We greatly appreciate it. If you are looking for any prior episodes, if you access www.stillroseswomen.com, click on the podcast link there. You can find all of our prior episodes and just check everything out. It's lots of good stuff. Brooke, thank you again. And thank you, everybody.
Bye.